Black Undercover boss orders coffee and toast, stops cold when waitress says tips don't cover basic needs. Under the soft, golden light of the morning sun, a small cafe nestled in the midst of a bustling street hummed like a symphony greeting the new day. The clinking of cups and dishes rang out in rhythm, blending with the aroma of freshly toasted bread and the scent of freshly brewed coffee that seemed to embrace the entire space. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the morning, every employee was busy in their role. The barista, the baker, the greeter, everything moved like a well-oiled machine, yet somewhere within it, there were still cracks that not everyone noticed. Amidst the crowd, a man of color sat quietly in a corner of the cafe, hidden behind a gray coat and a baseball cap pulled low to shield his sharp eyes. He was the founder and CEO of this famous cafe chain, a man in his 40s who had placed his trust in a dream of a second home for all his staff. When he laid the first foundation stone for Foster's Cafe, he firmly believed it would be a beacon of hope and fairness, a place where every tip would reach the hands of those who deserved it, delivered with sweat and sincere smiles. His seat was bathed in the golden glow from the overhead pendant light, casting shimmering streaks across the wooden table. He glanced around the cafe, where the large front window reflected the images of customers, enjoying the rich aroma of coffee and the warmth of freshly toasted bread. Every glance, every movement of the staff here was etched into his memory, because he knew that only by placing himself in the position of an ordinary customer could he see the truths hidden behind. Those daily smiles, the morning sunlight filtered through every window pane, shining on the illuminated pause machine at the barista counter. The beep sound rang out regularly, like the heartbeat of a cold steel heart, signaling that all transactions were taking place. In that familiar sound, he heard both joy and hardship, but each employee poured into their work. Because he was the one who personally approved each machine, each piece of software, with one sole wish: fairness, transparency, so that every drop of sweat shed would never be in vain. But today, he returned to Foster's Cafe not just to enjoy a strong cup of coffee or to admire the golden pastries under the lights. He came back to listen to the very breath of the dream he had once nurtured. A dream that seemed so simple, but it was so hard to grasp. A dream of a place where everyone was treated fairly, where tips didn't vanish into the sleight of hand of power plays. His hand lightly grasped the white porcelain cup, his fingers tracing the rim as if touching the memories of his past. Every pastry, every drop of coffee, every laugh of the staff from the old days, replayed in his mind like a slow-motion film. He remembered the very first day Foster's Cafe opened. He welcomed the very first customers, assigned each shift to ensure fairness, typed each tip distribution notice to make sure at Foster's every effort is valued. The sound of the POS machine beeped. That sound brought him back to reality. He looked up, his eyes quietly scanning the cafe. A group of baristas huddled together, laughing about something. A young new employee stood silently by the pastry counter, her eyes revealing a fear she couldn't hide. In that moment, his heart clenched. He sensed that something had changed. The atmosphere of the cafe, the looks of the employees, and even those small gestures, all whispered to him that Foster's Cafe of old had changed, and perhaps he had allowed it to happen. He sighed. His eyes became distant. Inside him, a small flame flickered, the flame of the old faith, of the promises he had once made to himself and to all the staff. Foster's is the home of sharing. And today he knew he had to do something to rekindle that flame, not just for himself, but for all those who had believed in the dream he had built. The morning light shone on his hair, revealing the silver strands of a man who had tasted all the sweetness and bitterness of the business world. Yet in those eyes still shone the light of a heart that had never surrendered. Foster's had changed, but he knew with just one right action, with just one resolute decision, everything could return to how it was on the very first day. And he, the founder, would be the one to rekindle that flame of fairness. Michael nodded slightly, ordering a strong black coffee and a slice of the toast he had once proudly called Foster's Cafe's specialty. The young waitress brought his order, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the plate on the table, her eyes avoiding his as if afraid of something. Michael smiled warmly, his voice gentle, full of concern. "How's work here going, dear?" A faint whisper, weak as the wind brushing through a window crack. Her voice trembled, caught in her throat. "Don't worry, I'm okay, but I often skip breakfast. The tips are too small, not enough for a proper meal. A simple confession, just a few words, but it was like a knife slicing deep into Michael's heart. His eyes darkened, his breath caught in his chest. He had once believed that Foster's Cafe was a shared home, a place where every employee was respected, where every tip was fairly divided. And yet now, this very girl, someone who should have been sheltered by Foster's, was skipping meals because her tips couldn't even buy a decent breakfast. Michael sat in silence, his heart feeling squeezed tight. A drop of bitter coffee hit his tongue, but it was the bitter sting in his soul that hurt more. His Foster's, the creation he had poured his whole heart into, was turning into a place where even the most basic needs were denied to the very people who made it work. The morning light streamed through the window, highlighting the deep lines etched on his forehead, the marks of a man who had poured all his faith into the values of fairness and sharing. In that moment, Michael knew he had forgotten something important, and now he could no longer look the other way. Michael sat quietly in the cafe's corner, the soft yellow light casting his face into relief, shadows etching the wrinkles that bore witness to the long days and nights he had given to Foster's Cafe. He suppressed a sigh, his eyes following the busy steps of the staff as they prepared for a busy morning. But then, something struck him like a dagger. A group of young staff gathered behind the barista counter, giggling confident, their eyes were shining like actors. On the barista counter, a familiar stage. He noticed one thing. This group always got assigned to the bar during peak hours, when the line of customers stretched long, when tips poured in like a monsoon. Their smiles carried a tinge of arrogance, a hint of smugness, as if the golden light shining down was just for them. Every beep from the POS machine rang out, the flickering green light reflecting off the glass, like a pre-written melody played for those who held the power to divide the tips. Michael turned his gaze toward the young waitress, sitting quietly at the pastry counter. Her hands worked quickly to clean the counter, eyes occasionally glancing at the barista counter, a look that was both shy and helpless. The golden light from the ceiling illuminated her face, revealing eyes as dim as a candle flickering in a stormy night. Michael realized she was always pushed into the low-traffic shifts, hours when customers were sparse, tips so meager they wouldn't even buy her a decent breakfast. A harsh reality he had once thought would never happen at Foster's. His eyes suddenly rested on the POS machine, the very machine he had once regarded as a symbol of transparency, of fairness. He clearly remembered the day he signed off on that system, believing it would be a loyal companion for the staff, ensuring everyone got paid what they deserved. And yet now, under the swift fingers of that young barista, a single merge tips click could turn the sweat of people like that waitress into a bonus for the trusted group, those who held the power. Michael felt a sharp pain in his chest. Memories of the early days flooded back, like an old film fading with time. Back then, he had personally divided each tip among the staff. Their eyes shone bright, brimming with hope and faith in a place that felt like a second home. But now those eyes were gone, replaced by lowered gazes of resignation or glimmering with calculation. Foster's, once a home, was turning into a stage for manipulations and power games. Michael drew a deep breath, his eyes blazing with a spark of determination. Inside, he whispered to himself, if he didn't stand up for justice, everything he'd built would be nothing but an empty shell. Michael left his seat. His breath was quick, but his eyes still held that unwavering determination. He quietly walked to the pastry counter, where the young waitress was busy wiping away leftover crumbs. She jumped as she saw him standing close, her hands instinctively stopping as if fearing everything she did might become a reason for someone's judgment. Michael gently placed his hand on the counter. His voice lowered, every word weighted with his heart. I'm sorry for letting you fall into this. You don't deserve to endure this injustice, just because of a system that's been corrupted. The young waitress looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. The golden light from the ceiling cast a glow on her face, highlighting every exhausted line from sleepless nights. A tear rolled down her cheek, not just from sadness, but because in that moment, she had found a place to unburden her heart. Michael inhaled deeply, his gaze harder than ever. He turned, heading straight for the POS counter. His steps thudded on the tile floor, like the drumbeat of a final battle. He stopped in front of the young barista, who sat nonchalantly behind the POS screen. The young man looked up, his face calm, the flickering green light reflecting on his high-nosed bridge, making him look like a smug ruler in the castle he'd built himself. Michael looked straight into the young man's eyes, his voice clear and firm. I once believed that Foster's was a home of fairness and sharing, but today I've witnessed you turning it into a stage for greed and privilege. Do you know that with just one click of yours, you can take away the breakfast of someone who needs it more than you do? The young barista remained silent, his hand trembling slightly on the baggage, the keyboard, but trying to maintain a confident facade. Michael didn't stop. His voice grew even more resolute. I will not let another click destroy the trust of my staff and customers. Right now, I demand that all tip data be restored and redistributed according to each person's effort. I will personally oversee that process. A collective sigh spread across the cafe, as if every heart was simultaneously released from a heavy burden. The golden light grew warmer, shining on Michael's face, illuminating a flicker of hope. Hope that Foster's could return to being the home he once promised to build with all his heart. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping the floor with a sharp sound like an alarm bell. The golden light from the ceiling fell on his gray-streaked hair, highlighting determined beams of light like proof of a resolve that had fully ripened. In that moment, all sounds in the cafe seemed to freeze. There were no more forced laughs, no more beep-beep sounds from the POS machine, only the eyes of everyone fixed on him. His voice rose, each word echoing against the walls, powerful and sharp like a blade slicing through all deception. These are your sweat and tears stolen by those in management. I am the founder of Foster's, where every dollar of tips was once shared fairly with the people who sweated for it. Today I stand here and declare, I will no longer forgive this injustice. Not for one more second, stunned eyes stared at him. The staff's breathing seemed to stop, as if only the sound of their own heartbeats remained. The green light from the pause screen reflected on the manager's face, highlighting beads of sweat running down his temples and dripping onto his cheeks like the tears of someone who knew he was about to lose everything. His hands trembled. The pen he was holding seemed about to slip from fingers no longer strong enough to hold it. Michael stared deep into his eyes, his voice still low but sharp as steel. I once believed Foster's was a home of fairness, but you have turned it into a place of lies, turning the sweat of one person into the reward for another. Right here, right now, every dollar of tips will be returned to those who truly deserve it. The golden light moved, shining on the young waitress's eyes. Her eyes sparkled with tears, but in those tears was no longer resignation, but a shining light of hope, of faith reborn after long dark nights. Her eyes met Michael's as if finding an anchor in the storm. In that moment, Foster's became a true home again, a place where every drop of sweat was respected, where fairness was called by its true name. Michael paused his gaze on the young waitress, her eyes now bright with rekindled trust. He walked slowly towards her, his voice still warm, but his eyes gleaming with unwavering resolve. You have bravely held onto your faith, even when everything around you was falling apart. The flame of fairness at Foster's, you are the one who kept it from dying out. And now you are the one who deserves to stand and light it up for everyone. The young waitress lifted her hand to wipe away her tears, her eyes trembling but warmer than ever. Michael gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was both congratulatory and carried the warmth of trust. From today, I want you to be the shift manager, the one who leads others with the courageous heart of your own. I trust that you can uphold what Foster's was originally built on, fairness, respect, and sharing. His voice lowered, but his eyes remained strong. Don't let anyone, even those wearing the manager's uniform, extinguish that light of fairness ever again. A soft breeze blew by, carrying the sweet scent of apple pie, weaving through every strand of hair, every breath. The young waitress bowed her head, her shoulders trembling with emotion. The golden light shone on her face, the face of someone who had been seen, believed in, and was ready to fight for Foster's, the home Michael had built with all his love and hope. Michael took a deep breath, his eyes sweeping over every face that was watching intently. His voice rose, low but firm, like the vow of someone who had laid the very foundations of Foster's. From today, Foster's will no longer be a stage for injustice. I will reform the entire system, ensuring that every shift is distributed fairly, so no one has to worry about their tips being stolen again. Everyone, whether new or old, deserves to receive exactly what they have worked for. The murmurs gradually faded, leaving a warm silence in the cafe. Michael turned toward the young waitress, the morning's golden light shining on her face, reflecting the hope that had just been rekindled. Her eyes widened in surprise as he gently placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice soft but full of trust. "I'm entrusting you with the responsibility of being the shift manager here. You will be the one to protect this flame of fairness, to make sure Foster's always remains a home for everyone." A sparkling tear gently slid down her cheek, a tear of hope and renewed faith. The golden light shone on her face, highlighting the radiance of someone who had found themselves again. The entire cafe seemed to come back to life. The golden lights no longer felt out of place, but spread a warm glow throughout the place. Like those early days when Michael first stepped into this place, with dreams of fairness and sharing, the smell of apple pie, the sound of coffee dripping, all blended together like a gentle melody. Michael stood still, his eyes following the steps of the young waitress, who was now smiling brightly in the morning light. In that moment, he understood, just one brief meeting, one click on the POS system, that was all it took to change an entire unjust system. And more than anything, just one courageous heart willing to stand up could ensure that the light of fairness would never die at Foster's. The golden light from the coffee counter shone on Michael's face, highlighting the wrinkles of a man who had weathered many storms to build Foster's into a second home for so many people. He slowly scanned the cafe, where the sweat of his staff still lingered on every cup of coffee, every plate of pastry, every expectant gaze. His voice rang out, low but resolute, like a hymn of justice and sharing fairness does not lie in revenue reports or cold statistical figures. It lies in the way we treat the people who have shed their sweat and tears to build this place. The cafe fell silent, leaving only the sound of coffee dripping into cups and the gentle rustling of the wind through the windows. But in that moment, Foster's Cafe was reborn, not just by the golden light, but by the very hearts of the people standing there. An undercover boss story rich in humanity, an NFO touching the reader's heart. A place where even the smallest action, a genuine glance, could light up hope, restoring fairness for those who had once put their trust in Foster's Cafe. Once again, the dream of fairness and sharing was called by name, a dream that had never faded,